This was the beginning of a strange time in her father's house. The Marquis spent most of his time at Versailles, and Sido was left alone to explore the chateau and read the unread books. On his return, her father would talk of the parties he had attended and how well he had been received, of Madame this and the Duchess of that. He never discussed Sido's forthcoming marriage, just as he never discussed politics or the revolution. The closest he came to acknowledging that anything untoward was happening was when he bemoaned how many of his friends had seen fit to leave for long vacations abroad. Of Versailles he talked more favourably, of balls, parties and the card tables, though here too he had his complaints. "I observe," he said, "that standards of dress are slipping. It is a tragedy, the loss of whalebone in corsets. Whalebone gives women such excellent stature. Now the fashion is for all ladies to look like milkmaids in their white muslin gowns, without proper support or lacing. As a result," he announced, as if it were the most shocking piece of news ever, "women are slouching. So inelegant." Sido listened quietly, relieved that there was no need for her to comment, for what could she say to such a kaleidoscope of folly? She realized that, like the king himself, the Marquis was out of touch with what was happening all around him. The decadence, the waste continued, and still the poor stayed poor, while her father and his acquaintances determinedly danced, dined, gambled, gossiped, and spent their way to disaster. It was only after the murder of his friend, Madame Perrien, that the fact that something terrible was happening dawned upon him. By then, it was all too late. It had started with one of the Marquis's extravagances, a grand fete. Now that the National Assembly had collectively lost its mind and agreed to pass this ridiculous declaration of the rights of man, he felt it his duty to throw one of his spectacular parties, a reminder, if one was needed, of how preposterous this revolution was. For the idea that all men were equal was laughable. No one in his right mind could believe it. In his opinion, the sooner the populace was crushed, the better. For the time being, the Marquis was more concerned about deciding on a theme for his fete. After days of deliberation, he settled on the idea that everyone would come dressed as a character from the Commedia dell'arte. The guests would be transported across the lake to an Italian piazza, where they would dine and be entertained by jugglers, fire-eaters, and tightrope artists. Scores of scene painters, carpenters, and metalworkers were needed to make such an ambitious vision reality. The invitations were sent out, with one notable and fatal exception: Count Kaliowski. The Marquis's reason for leaving the Count off the guest list was childish, with, alas, no thought to the consequences. The Marquis was bitterly jealous of Count Kaliowski's new acquaintance with Robespierre, a bourgeois lawyer from Arras, one of the leaders of the revolution. Misguidedly, the Marquis believed that once the Count discovered he had not been invited to this party, he would come back full of remorse. For how could he ever have risen so high in court circles without the Marquis's help and guidance? The Marquis had a talent for rearranging unpalatable truths to suit his narrow point of view. What concerned him the most at the present time, and had almost turned the pink clouds of his mind grey with worry, was what to wear, so as to outshine all his guests. Finally he concluded that none of the characters from the Commedia dell'arte reflected his noble nature, so he decided upon a costume that would truly enhance the glories of his personality. He would be the sun itself. Sido, on hearing that the Count was not coming, had felt a huge sense of relief. Now she could enjoy the fete without any worries about her forthcoming betrothal. Yet in all the preparations, her father never once asked to see her, and as the day drew nearer she realized that she'd once again been forgotten. On the eve of the party, The Marquis, as if at last remembering her, called for Sido to be brought to his chamber. He was sitting in his dressing robe, his feet in a bowl of rose water while his fingernails were attended to, a glass of champagne in the other hand, and beside him on the table a small pyramid of confectionery. He looked at Sido and said irritably, "Don't stand there, the light is most unbecoming." He addressed Luke, his valet. "She may observe the party from the side room in the temple, but that is all. I don't want her wandering about tomorrow. Everything must be charming." With that he lifted his pampered hand and waved her away. Not for the first time did Sido wonder why it was that her father disliked his only child so very much.